Hello, friends. Well, it's been another crazy couple of weeks. I'm wondering if I'm ever going to get on here and just say something like, wow, nothing crazy happened for several weeks in a row. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Anyway, this was extra crazy. As many of you know, friends of ours, David and Jamielynn Sharp, were excommunicated and disfellowshipped, respectively. And they had not done anything. This isn't funny. But it's absurd. The reason I think that some of these things make us chuckle when they're not really funny is that absurd and funny sort of provoke the same human emotion or reaction. It's just to laugh. I don't know what to say. Dave had a very humble YouTube channel where he expressed his belief that Joseph Smith was not a polygamist. But he was asked is an interesting word. He was invited to take his channel down or face church discipline, and he did. Now, the story's longer than that, but I'll let them tell their own story. I'll put a couple of links in the description box so you can see their story for yourself if you haven't already. But Dave took his channel down, and his channel was down at the time that he was invited to the membership council with his wife. And on the day that they were disciplined, his channel was down. So this is incredible. You're not going to believe it. If you haven't already seen it, this will blow your mind. They were asked not to talk about this subject anymore. I'm not talking about at church or anything like that. I'm talking about it at all. So you'll just have to watch it for yourself. It is truly mind-boggling. I wanted to read a few quotes from Joseph Smith just to, I don't know, does this really need to be driven home? Probably not for most people, but I'm going to read these quotes from Joseph Smith. And bless his heart, Steve Reed, who has the website called oneclimbs.com. And again, there will be a link to that in the description box. But he compiled several of Joseph Smith's wonderful quotations on truth. So I wanted to read just a handful of them to you. These are from Joseph Smith. One of the grand fundamental principles of Mormonism is to receive truth, let it come from whence it may. Another one, he says, I stated that the most prominent difference in sentiment between the Latter-day Saints and sectarians was that the sectarians were all circumscribed by some peculiar creed which deprived its members the privilege of believing anything not contained therein, whereas the Latter-day Saints are ready to believe all true principles that exist as they are made manifest from time to time. Mormonism is truth, and every man who embraces it feels himself at liberty to embrace every truth. Consequently, the shackles of superstition, bigotry, ignorance, and priestcraft fall at once from his neck. The first and fundamental principle of our holy religion is that we believe that we have a right to embrace all and every item of truth without limitation. If only, right? So this is just an interesting time. As you see comments on the videos that Dave and Jamielynn are doing right now, they did one explaining their whole situation, and they're going to be on Steve Pynakker, and they'll tell their story on there. And anywhere else where they're commenting online, you're going to see people leave comments like, well, I know this isn't all you did. I know you have to do more than this to get excommunicated. I know you guys are leaving out details. So you didn't just share it privately, because people don't get excommunicated for just sharing things privately or believing them. So while that's normally the case, and in my case, I was not being totally private about my beliefs. I was being very public about them. So this is very different than Dave and Jamielynn's case. They were being very private about it. They weren't talking about it at church. As I said, they had taken their channel down. and they were still escorted out of the church effectively. So this is aggravating to see people leave those sorts of comments in their ignorance. But I'm going to tell you, if seen in the right light, it's good news, comments like that. And I'll tell you why. It shows that these people making those comments are still outraged or would still be outraged at this kind of treatment. Do you see what I'm saying? It strikes them as very wrong and very unjust for someone to be kicked out for their beliefs or things that they're talking about privately with friends. So the fact that these people cannot believe that that's really why the Sharps were disciplined is actually a good sign that these people still have that sense of right and wrong and that sense of justice. So even though they're skeptical that that's really the reason, it is good news that the people aren't saying things like, well, good, they should be kicked out if they believe differently, right? That's not what they're saying. They're saying this, they can't have been kicked out just for their beliefs. So sad that they are getting kicked out for their beliefs, but good that that still offends people, if that makes sense. So I'm going to put, as I said, links to all these things. So go and watch all of them if you haven't seen them already. So the other thing I wanted to do today is tell you a quick story that I think is really good news. We actually met up with Dave and Jamielynn the day after they had their membership council, and we met up with them for lunch. And on the way, we stopped at a random dollar store just to grab something. And in the store, there was a customer who looked at me for a second and he said, "Are you Karen?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he says, "Oh, I love your work." And so we talked, and I had never met him. So it was just very cool to have somebody, like recognize me from the work. And we talked about Joseph Smith and this whole thing. So that was very cool. So then later that evening, on our way home from northern Utah, heading south, we just stopped at a random Olive Garden to grab a bite to eat. And our server was so nice that I had to give her a pass-along card so that she could watch the Woe Unto You, Scribes video. And again, I have to remember to plug that movie every time I talk here in case anyone tuning in has not seen it yet. So if you haven't watched it, please go watch Woe Unto You, Scribes, The Hidden History of Polygamy. So I gave her a pass-along card because I just felt like she would appreciate it. And she did. She asked me some questions about it right there at the table. And then she thanked me, and then she disappeared. And in a couple of minutes, she came back with another server who also wanted one of the cards. So I gave one to her as well, and we had a little chat. So that was awesome, super fun. So then when we were ready to leave, we got up, and the people at the table next to us literally said, "Are you Karen?" And again, it was the coolest thing. The third story is we went to an LDS sacrament meeting the next day to a ward I've never been to. And someone there also said, "Oh, you have the podcast." So she also was familiar with the work. To some degree, I don't know. I didn't talk to her about it because we were visiting a relative who's very nervous about this. And so I didn't want to put that person in any awkward position. So we didn't really talk about it. But here's the deal. It's not like I've had so much exposure that 3 people would randomly recognize me from 3 random places. That's mathematically very unlikely. I believe that the message that the Lord is trying to send by that is that He is a master choreographer, that He is in charge, and that He's got this. He can arrange encounters with whoever He needs to put in your path. And you don't need to stress out, or we don't need to be overbearing as we share these things. Nothing like that. He will put in our path the people who need this message. He's absolutely able to help people meet up in any circumstances as we just live our lives, he can do this for us. And that is my testimony, that I know he's got this. We don't need to be fretful, and we don't need to be filled with anxiety. We can just be still and know that he's God. So I want to read again from Doctrine and Covenants 123. We often read verse 13 that tells us that we should waste and wear out our lives in bringing to light all the hidden things of darkness wherein we know them, and that these should be attended to with great earnestness. That's a wonderful scripture and a good reminder. But I also want to make sure that we don't forget the last verse. Therefore, let us cheerfully do all things that lie in our power, and then may we stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God and for his arm to be revealed. So God will turn all of this to good, even excommunications, even unjust treatment, even people who don't believe us. He can turn all of this to good, and he will, as we cheerfully strive to do all that's in our power. So I know that, and it's such a comfort. So I wish Dave and Jamielynn the best, and I know they're going to make the most of this. And I hope to see all their videos back up soon, back on their channel, since I presume they'll be putting them up. So meanwhile, please go watch their interviews and everything. I'm not sure when the Steve Pynakker interview will be, but as soon as there's a link to that, I'll put it here in case you guys miss it for any reason. All right. Keep up the good work, everyone, and keep sharing and cheerfully doing everything in your power. And God will bring everything to light that he needs to. And I'll see you next time.